Hey guys, tonight's story takes us to the 18th century, a time when being locked away didn't always mean you were guilty, and getting out didn't always mean you were innocent. Back then, the walls of a prison weren't built just to keep people in. They were built to make money. Before we begin, take a moment to like the video and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, close your eyes. The year is 1720. The streets outside smell like wood smoke and rain, and your name has just been written into the warden's ledger. You don't remember exactly when fear became silence. The walk to the prison was long, your wrists rubbed raw by rope, the cobblestones slick from a day of cold drizzle. Someone mentioned it would be temporary, just a misunderstanding, a debt that would soon be settled. But as the gates close behind you with a heavy final sound, you already understand that no one is paying for you tonight. The air is thick. It smells of damp straw, smoke, and rusted iron. Voices overlap in the dark, a cough, a prayer, a whisper, the clink of a chain against stone. You're led to a desk lit by a single candle. The man behind it does not ask what you did. He asks how much you can pay. You say, nothing. He nods, makes a mark beside your name, and gestures toward a corridor that disappears into shadow. The cell is smaller than you expected. The ceiling drips steadily into a dark corner. A puddle spreads across uneven stones. There is straw in place of a bed, already shaped by someone else's sleep. A slit of a window lets in a ribbon of grey. The door shuts. The lock slides home like the end of a thought. Time in here is not clockwork, it is weather. The light is always almost morning or almost night. You learn to count by sound, boots passing above you, a bucket dragged down the hall, the slow dripping of water through stone. Hunger arrives early. Food, when it comes, is a crust the colour of old wood, and a broth that tastes faintly of ash. If you want more, you must pay. But you have nothing, so you eat carefully and pretend not to notice the insects. The guards do not shout. Their authority is quieter than that. It is the weight of keys at a belt. The glance that says everything here can be given or withheld. From the next cell, a calm voice explains the truth. This is not punishment, he says. This is profit. Meals, blankets, candles, even cleaner air can be rented. A man with coin may dine upstairs by candlelight. A man without coin counts the ribs in his own chest. It's not an exaggeration. In London's Marshalsea prison, debtors once paid rent for the cells they occupied. Those who couldn't pay were thrown into the common side, where disease and hunger did the work of justice. In France, at the Bastille, nobles purchased comfort and privacy, while the poor slept side by side on wet stone. Across Europe, the line between guilt and poverty blurred, until they became the same thing. Days blend together. The calm voice tells you that letters can be sent outward, that a cousin or creditor might be persuaded that a keeper can be warmed with silver. Freedom, he says, is not declared. It is purchased. You want to laugh, but you don't, because you hear the careful way he says it, and you know it's true. You begin to notice the market in motion. A coin slipped for softer straw, 2 coins for thicker soup, a tin cup of ale passed along a corridor like a secret. Even kindness is counted here. A message carried to a sister, a moment in the sunlit yard, the right to keep your shoes. Everything has a price. In the Marshalsea, they called it garnish money. New arrivals paid older inmates for the privilege of existing in peace. In Newgate, the keeper took fees for everything, from removing irons to letting families visit. A man could spend months earning small coins with labour, only to hand them back to the jailer for a candle to see by. Justice was paperwork. Survival was bookkeeping. There is disease, of course. It arrives quietly and leaves quietly, carried by breath and bucket. They call it jail fever, a cousin of typhus. It sweeps through the narrow corridors every few months, taking the weak first, then the strong who try to bury them. The dead are moved when someone pays to move them, or when the smell demands it. Some mornings, an empty cell is the only announcement a man receives. There is no ceremony, only space for the next name in the book. Weeks become a season. Your senses simplify. The sound of rats becomes company. You memorize the cracks in your wall the way a sailor memorizes stars. You dream, not of freedom, but of warmth, of sunlight, of a bed that doesn't move when you breathe. The body adjusts even when the mind protests. It's one of its sad talents. At night, the calm voice tells stories. He says he once worked in a counting house near the Thames, handling ledgers filled with numbers he could never earn for himself. He tells you about men who fell into debt for pennies, then died paying for the privilege of dying slowly. Sometimes he hums, a tune that almost remembers being music. You listen because it's proof that something human still exists here. One evening, footsteps echo differently, heavier, slower. A door slams farther down the hall. A short argument follows. Two men, one demanding, one pleading. Then the sound of coins being counted. In the morning, the calm voice is gone. His cell stands open, straw flattened where he used to lie. You ask the guard what happened. He shrugs and says, "He paid." After that, the corridor feels larger. It contains absence as well as bodies. You start to wonder what you are worth, not in virtue or guilt, but as a number someone could count into the keeper's hand. You consider escape. The locks are old, the doors are wood, and your hands are not weak. But you've seen what happens when iron chases flesh. You have no coin for consequences, so you wait. Waiting becomes a kind of work. You listen to the pattern of rounds, to who earns a candle and who earns only darkness, to which names are spoken softly and which are spoken like debts. You learn that some men are not here for what they did, but because someone profits from their staying. The building does not ask your story, it invoices it. Outside, the world keeps inventing new ways to forget you. Across the Channel, France builds more prisons. In the colonies, men are shipped overseas to labor for years, sometimes for life, under the same sun that once warmed their homes. You hear rumors of a new design, the penitentiary, a place meant to reform rather than rot. But you know that every reform begins as another form of control. In your cell, the days shrink. You learn to sleep in slices. When you wake, you count heartbeats. When you sleep, You dream of paper. Letters you'll never send, petitions never read. You whisper them to yourself like prayers. They sound reasonable at first, then less so, until even your own voice becomes another sound the stones absorb. And still, you wait. The year has changed, though no one told you. You notice it only by the cold, the way your breath fogs when you speak. Somewhere above, a bell marks the hour. You count it twice, unsure if it means morning or night. You are no longer sure it matters. Days begin to stretch again. Some mornings you wake to the sound of the turnkey's boots and almost believe you'll be called next. But the footsteps always stop a few doors away. Someone else's name is spoken, coins exchange hands, and the lock turns in another man's favor. You close your eyes and let the silence settle back in. The seasons move even when you cannot. In spring, water drips faster through the ceiling cracks. In summer, the air grows heavy and sour. In winter, your breath hangs like a ghost above the straw. You learn that every sound in the corridor changes with the weather. The coughs sharper in cold air, the footsteps duller when rain seeps into the stones. Sometimes a guard tells stories through the bars. He says Newgate Prison has grown so full that debtors share chains to save iron. He laughs when he says it, but you hear the weariness beneath. He tells you that in America, across the ocean, some colonies had begun sending prisoners to labor on farms instead of keeping them locked away. He calls it mercy. You imagine the sea between here and there, grey, endless, indifferent, and you are not sure mercy is the right word. Once a month, a man from the church walks the hall. He speaks blessings in a language most of you don't understand. He says he is collecting names for prayer. You wonder how long a prayer lasts once it leaves this place. A minute? A lifetime? You whisper yours anyway, just in case the walls are listening. One evening, a new prisoner arrives. You hear him long before you see him, shouting, bargaining, promising gold. The guards ignore him. Later, he whispers through the wall that he was a merchant. Caught with debts he swears are not his fault. He lists the things he owned. A carriage, silk, a wife who still writes to him. You do not answer at first. Then you tell him that silence is easier than hope. He stops talking after that. Weeks pass and his voice returns, quieter now. He says he has found a way to pay. You don't ask how. You already know the steps, the whispered deal, the payment recorded in some hidden ledger. One morning, the cell opposite yours stands open again. The straw inside still bears the shape of a body. You realize you are surrounded by ghosts who simply left walking. You remember hearing that in the Bastille. Prisoners sometimes left their names carved into the walls so the world would remember them. You begin carving yours, not letters, just small marks counted like days. The stone resists at first, then yields. It feels good to leave evidence that you were real. Outside, reforms are being discussed. You hear scraps of conversation between guards. A politician wants prisons run by the state instead of private keepers. Another says it will never work. Who would pay? You smile in the dark. No one ever truly wants to pay. That's the reason places like this exist. Then, one morning, something changes. The air feels different, less heavy. almost clean. You wake to find a scrap of paper pushed under your door. It's a note from the clerk, written in cramped ink. Your release to be considered. Await verification. You stare at the words until they blur. It could mean anything. A mistake, a rumor, another man with your name. But still, you fold it carefully and keep it with you. A fragile piece of daylight small enough to hide in your palm. For days, nothing happens. Then footsteps stop outside your cell. The lock turns. A guard tells you to stand. You obey slowly, afraid that moving too fast will break the spell. At the desk, the keeper doesn't look up. He's counting coins, silver, neatly stacked. You hear your name spoken, and for a moment you don't recognize it. A relative, perhaps, or a friend of a friend, has paid what you owe. The key turns again, this time on the outer door. Light hits your face, sharp as metal. Your eyes burn, your lungs fill with air that smells of rain and horses and life. You step outside. The ground feels unsteady, as though the earth itself is surprised to have you back. You walk because stopping would mean thinking. The street is narrower than you remember. People pass without looking. They do not see the months behind your eyes. You hear vendors calling, children running, the ordinary sounds of freedom that no longer belong to you. You want to tell them what it's like inside, how silence sounds when it has weight, how time becomes a hallway with no doors, but the words stay in your throat. Freedom requires quiet too. You find a bench near the river. The water moves easily, unbothered. Somewhere upstream, it passes the walls you left behind, touching the stones that once touched you. For a while you watch it and think about all the others still waiting. The boy who traded his shoes, the man who sang, the merchant who bought his exit. Their names drift past in your mind like ripples. You realize that freedom is not a single moment. It is a slow forgetting. Every breath carries a fragment of the place until none are left. A cart rumbles past, carrying bricks stamped with the crown's seal. You overhear two men talking. They say new prisons will be built soon, cleaner, better organized. The word they use is reform. You wonder what that means for the next generation of prisoners. Will they still pay for blankets? Will they still measure hope in coins? You hope not, but history is fond of repetition. As evening falls, the city softens. The smell of bread drifts from somewhere unseen. A church bell rings the hour, and for once you don't count it. You simply listen. The sound is neither freedom nor captivity. It is something quieter, continuation. You breathe in, steady and slow. The air tastes of rain and smoke, and maybe, faintly, of possibility. Somewhere behind you in the prison you left, a new name is being written into the ledger. Someone else is answering the same questions. How much can you pay? How long can you wait? The cycle begins again, and the city goes on pretending not to hear. You stand from the bench and walk toward the dim glow of lanterns. Each step feels like a small negotiation with the ground, a reminder that the world is both cruel and astonishingly indifferent. You do not look back again. The sky above the rooftops is the color of pewter. You think of the others still waiting in the dark, of their slow breathing, of the quiet trade between despair and endurance. You hope silently that they dream of something better than walls. The river keeps moving, the city exhales, and somewhere, far away, a key turns in another lock. It is the year 1720. Europe is restless but alive. Its roads, rivers and harbours carrying merchants, pilgrims, soldiers and dreamers. The continent hums with the slow rhythm of travel, a rhythm measured not in hours but in seasons. A traveller sets out from London before dawn. The city is still wrapped in mist and coal smoke. He rides in a stagecoach drawn by 4 horses, each step striking the cobblestones like the ticking of a giant clock. The coach is heavy, painted black and gold, its body suspended on leather straps. Inside, 6 passengers sit close enough to share breath, but not conversation. The smell is a mix of damp wool, candle wax, and stale bread. Outside, the postboy blows a horn to warn those ahead, a sound as common as birdsong. At 5 miles an hour, the countryside unrolls like a faded map. Villages pass by, crooked houses, fields of barley, smoke rising from morning fires. Every few miles, the coach stops to change horses at an inn called a posting house. The horses are exhausted after just an hour of galloping. Fresh ones wait, steaming in the cold air. The passengers stretch their legs, sip weak ale, and climb back aboard. Travel in 1720 is not a single experience, but 1,000 small discomforts stitched together. Dust in summer, mud in spring, snow in winter. A road might vanish halfway between towns washed out by rain or claimed by thieves, and yet people keep moving because standing still is its own kind of poverty. A merchant named Henri travels south from Paris with bolts of silk and a ledger full of promises. He rides not in a coach but on a mule, safer for the mountain passes. The roads of France are better than most. Louis XIV saw to that. But they are still rough in the countryside. Every bridge costs a toll, every gate a coin. At night he sleeps in roadside auberge, rooms that smell of smoke and cabbage, where bedbugs are the true landlords. He writes in his diary that the hardest part of travel is not the distance, but the silence between villages, where no one speaks his language. Far to the east, a scholar leaves Vienna bound for Prague. He carries letters of introduction, ink, and a heart full of caution. The Habsburg lands are wide and tangled, German one day, Czech the next. Carriages creak through forests of pine and spruce, the wheels reinforced with iron to survive the frozen mud. The scholar shares his seat with a priest who smells faintly of wine. They speak of philosophy until the road jolts them into silence. At every border, there are papers to show and questions to answer. Where do you come from? What do you carry? The answers are weighed like coins. Customs officers wear powdered wigs and suspicion. They search for contraband, tobacco, lace, foreign books. Information moves as slowly as the wagons that carry it, but it is still something to be taxed. Not everyone can afford a carriage. Along the same roads walk entire families on foot. Migrant labourers, beggars and soldiers without orders. They carry bundles of bread, a little cheese, maybe a flute or a prayer. The dust of the road becomes their clothing. Sometimes they travel beside great coaches for a few miles, listening to laughter and the jingle of harnesses before falling behind again. To cross great distances, rivers are faster. The Rhine, the Danube, the Loire, all highways of water lined with barges and sails. Boatmen shout to one another in a dozen languages. Cargoes of wine, salt, and cloth drift downstream, while upriver, crews strain against the current with poles and ropes. A single storm can undo a week's work. On foggy nights, boats tie together and share lantern light, their reflections trembling like thoughts half remembered. In port cities, the world smells of tar, fish, and ambition. Amsterdam, Marseille, Venice, and Lisbon, each one a hinge between continents. Here, travel means ships rather than roads. Sailors climb rigging that sways like cathedral bells in wind. They speak in curses and prayers, and sleep in hammocks while rats chew at the ropes. Every voyage is a gamble between wind and disease. Scurvy, dysentery, fevers that have no name. A journey to England from Italy can take 6 weeks or 6 months, depending on how generous the sea feels. To the people of 1720, distance itself is a kind of mystery. Few know the exact shape of the world beyond the next horizon. Maps are expensive, often wrong, and mostly decorative. Most travelers navigate by memory and rumor. Ask 10 people for directions, and you will receive 12 opinions. Inns are the beating hearts of the road. Each one a mixture of comfort and chaos. The better sort have a fire, a stable, and a landlord who keeps both honest books and good ale. The worst are traps for the unwary, places where knives come out faster than food. Still, everyone stops at them. Pilgrims, couriers, musicians, and spies. Letters change hands, secrets change price. The innkeeper's memory is the most valuable thing in the building. In the north, the roads of Holland are lined with windmills and canals. Travelers move by boat more often than by cart. A network of narrow waterways threads through villages like veins. The boats glide quietly, pushed by poles or small sails. Women wash linens at the edges. Children run along the towpaths, laughing in the drizzle. Even in the chill of winter, ice turns canals into glittering highways. Skaters carry messages faster than any horse. Across the Alps, the scene is entirely different. Paths cling to mountainsides like frightened thoughts. Pack mules wear bells so travelers can hear one another through fog. Avalanches erase the road without warning, and monasteries along the passes serve as shelters for those caught between seasons. Inside, monks keep soup simmering and candles burning. They record names in thick ledgers, pilgrims, soldiers, merchants, so that if someone disappears, the world at least remembers where they were last seen. Travelers speak of time differently here. They measure it in sunrises, not clocks. A letter sent from Madrid to Vienna might take 3 months if the winds are kind. To be away is not a temporary state, it is a life in itself. The world feels larger, slower, and somehow more permanent. The roads of Italy wind through olive groves and ruins. Every traveller passes something ancient, a crumbled arch, a Roman milestone half buried in weeds. Carriages share the way with herds of goats and pilgrims walking barefoot. In Rome, coaches clog the streets like drifting barges. Visitors arrive seeking art, relics, or forgiveness. They leave with dust on their shoes and stories that will grow grander with each retelling. At every corner of Europe, the same questions echo. How far is it? How safe? And how much will it cost? For most, the answer is the same. Farther than you think, less safe than you hope, and always more expensive than you can afford. Yet people keep moving for love, for trade, for curiosity, as though the act of leaving itself is a kind of prayer. Night gathers slowly across the continent. Lanterns bloom along the roads like scattered stars, and the ruts in the dirt shine faintly where rain has filled them. Stagecoaches depart long after sunset, their lamps swinging, their passengers half asleep. In the darkness, the driver's whip cracks once, a thin line of sound, and the journey resumes. On narrow forest roads, guards ride ahead with muskets ready. Robbers haunt the wooded passes between Mainz and Frankfurt, between Milan and Genoa. They know the schedules better than the postmasters do. Most attacks end not in violence, but negotiation. A few coins, a nod, a promise to forget each other's faces. For travellers, fear becomes another toll to pay. In the Channel ports, wind rules everything. Packets sail from Dover to Calais, from Dieppe to Brighton, small and stubborn ships that smell of salt, tar, and unwashed wool. Crossing the water takes only a few hours on a good day, but a good day is rare. Most passengers arrive pale, soaked, and grateful merely to stand still again. Passports are stamped by candlelight in the harbour master's office, wax dripping onto the damp floorboards. From Calais, a courier gallops toward Paris with a leather bag of letters sealed in red wax. He rides through the night, stopping every 10 miles at relay stations where fresh horses wait. The Royal Mail moves faster than anything else in Europe. A letter from London can reach Vienna in 3 weeks if no bridge collapses and no war begins along the route. Wars redraw borders faster than mapmakers can keep up. In 1720, peace is fragile. Soldiers still linger in garrisons left over from older conflicts. Every frontier crossing means a new uniform, a new language, a new tax. Merchants learn to carry small gifts, cloth, tobacco, sugar, to soften inspections. A smile and a handful of spice are worth more than any passport. By day, the roads fill again with humanity. A band of pilgrims marches south toward Rome, their hats pinned with scallop shells. They sing as they walk, their voices rising over the clatter of carts. Behind them, trudge traders bound for the Frankfurt Fair, leading mules heavy with metalwork and glass. Travel is devotion for one, profit for another, endurance for all. At the great fairs, Europe condenses into a single crowded square. Bohemians sell crystal beside English wool merchants. Books printed in Amsterdam lie beside Turkish coffee pots and Venetian masks. News spreads faster here than in any church or court. When the fair ends, the roads bloom again with departure, the continent exhaling. Winter travel is another world. Snow buries the ruts, rivers freeze into mirrors of glass. In the north, sledges replace wheels. Horses wear bells so their drivers can hear one another through the white silence. Travelers wrap their faces in scarves stiff with frost and follow the sound of metal runners cutting through the dark. In Russia and Scandinavia, frozen lakes become highways. Couriers race across them with messages bound for distant courts. Sometimes the ice cracks beneath them, swallowing horses whole. But messages still go on, the Empire's bloodstream refusing to freeze. Elsewhere, storms close the mountain passes. Travelers wait weeks at monasteries perched on ledges of snow. Monks brew beer, patch boots, and record the names of guests in ledgers so thick they seem to measure eternity. Outside, wind fills the valleys like an organ note, deep and endless. Every traveler learns the same lessons. Patience is currency. Silence keeps you safe. And the road never ends. It only changes name. In Spain, mules climb dusty hills past olive trees older than memory. Caravans of merchants rest in the shade at midday, trading news instead of money. In the lowlands, shepherds guide flocks across the meseta, their whistles echoing for miles. A traveller from the north finds the pace unbearable at first, then strangely soothing. Time itself seems to slow to the rhythm of hooves on dust. When rain returns, travellers crowd again into the inns. The fire crackles, boots steam beside it. An Italian violinist plays for his supper. A Dutch merchant snores through the tune. Someone reads aloud from a gazette printed months ago. The room listens as though the news were prophecy. Outside, wheels creak, doors slam, and the endless road waits for daylight. Dawn creeps over the London road, pale and slow, brushing frost from the hedges. Somewhere beyond the milepost stands a man waiting beside a black horse. He adjusts his gloves, checks the priming of his pistol, and listens to the quiet before the day begins. They call him a highwayman, one of many who haunt the turnpikes between the capital and the coast. His name will soon be forgotten, but for now, every traveller knows it in whispers. The year is 1721. England is still trembling from the South Sea bubble. Fortunes have vanished like mist. On the roads, gold still moves, carried by coaches whose windows are curtained against both dust and danger. The man waiting by the hedge knows their schedule better than the postmaster does. He was once a soldier, then a groom, and finally nothing at all. A pistol and a good horse are his only resume. His mare, a dark bay with a white blaze, stamps once, her breath a ribbon of smoke. He speaks softly to calm her. He is careful, always careful, never cruel, never hurried. The legends will later call highwaymen gallant, but gallantry is just another disguise for hunger. He robs because the road is his only employer. When the coach appears at last, it sounds before it can be seen. The rattle of wheels, the creak of leather, the postboy's horn cutting the air. The man steps out, raises one pistol, and lets the other rest easy in his belt. Stand and deliver. The words are ritual now, almost polite. Inside, the passengers freeze. A merchant, a widow, a clerk. They drop purses through the window. Coins fall into the grass with the same music as rain. He takes only what he must, 2 bags of silver and a watch, and bows slightly. The coach lurches away, its passengers whispering prayers and insults in equal measure. He rides in the opposite direction, the hooves muffled by damp soil. Every robbery is followed by silence. Only the wind witnesses the exchange. In those days, the highways are theatres of chance. Some men find wealth, others a noose. The Bow Street runners do not yet exist. Justice travels slower than rumour. Each county hires its own thief-takers, half police, half criminals themselves, paid by reward, not by conscience. When they hunt for coin, not morality. A highwayman hides by daylight in a wood outside Uxbridge. He counts the coins, wipes the pistols, and eats a crust of bread gone hard with age. The forest is quiet except for pigeons shifting in the branches. He remembers other mornings, army drills in Flanders, mud and trumpet calls, the promises of pay that never came. The king thanked his soldiers with paper, the road pays in silver. By night, he rides toward the coaching inns where gossip grows. He listens to talk of new patrols, of bounties posted at parish doors. He keeps to the edge of candlelight, sipping ale slowly. Sometimes the landlords know who he is. Sometimes they pretend not to. They trade silence for gold and call it hospitality. On the mantel of one such inn hangs a notice: highway robbery on the Great Western Road. Reward 10 guineas. The handwriting is careful, the ink barely dry. He reads it without expression. It describes his own horse perfectly, but calls her stolen. He smiles at the irony and orders another drink. England in 1721 is learning to travel faster. Turnpike trusts are paving new roads, posting gates every few miles, charging pennies to pass. Where money moves, danger follows. Some robberies are desperate acts, some theatrical. The public secretly loves them. Newspapers print every detail: the masks, the moonlight, the gallant beaux. A good highwayman's story sells more copies than sermons. The truth is less romantic. Most robbers are tired men on tired horses. They steal enough for a meal, then vanish into the hedgerows. But occasionally, one learns style. How to bow, how to speak softly, how to look like someone born to gentility. Our man learned that quickly. Charm is safer than powder. Weeks pass in this rhythm of road and refuge. He rides at dusk, hides by dawn, sleeps when he can. The seasons change around him. Frost turns to mud, mud to dust. He measures life by horseshoes and cartridges. He knows each mile between London and Oxford as though the earth itself had etched it into his bones. Sometimes he rides with others, temporary allies met in taverns. They share profits and betrayals equally. One night they ambush a mail coach near Reading. The bags are heavy with letters sealed by lords and ladies. They take what looks valuable and burn the rest in a ditch. The smell of wax and ink fills the air. Among the ashes, a few words survive. My dearest brother. He watches them curl into darkness. A month later, the same letter's absence betrays him. A servant recognizes the seal in a pawn shop and speaks too freely. The thief-takers have their clue. In London, a notice goes up. Wanted for highway robbery upon the Oxford Road. Description: middling height, brown hair, rides a bay mare with a white blaze. Reward 20 guineas. The price of a life measured in small gold coins. He rides harder now, changing inns every night. Rain follows him like a shadow. The horse tires. So does he. Sleep becomes dangerous. Each dream feels like surrender. He begins to think of escape not as freedom, but as stillness. One evening, he stops at an abandoned toll house. The gate has long since rotted away. Inside, a candle stub burns beside an old ledger. He opens it out of habit. The pages list names of travelers and their fees. The last entry is 10 years old. He writes his own name beneath it, then closes the book. Outside, thunder mutters across the plain. He mounts again, feeling the road tremble under the first drops of rain. Tomorrow he plans to ride north, to York, maybe to Scotland, anywhere the law grows thin. But tonight, the road feels shorter than ever, and the wind smells like endings. Rain thickens through the night. Each drop strikes his coat like a coin falling into water. By midnight, the road has turned to paste. The mare's hooves sink and pull free with a sound like sighing. Lightning flashes across the hedgerows, showing a milestone, a ditch, and, far ahead, the glow of another rider's lantern. He slows, uncertain. Sometimes smugglers move at this hour, sometimes constables. The light halts, then begins to move toward him. He feels the weight of both pistols and knows that either choice, fight or flee, will echo louder than thunder. When the first musket shot cracks the air, it's already too late. The ball grazes his shoulder, hot and shocking. He spurs the mare into the dark. Behind him, hooves pound in pursuit. A second shot, a curse, another flash of light. Then the ground vanishes, a ditch too wide to clear. Horse and rider crash together, a tangle of mud and breath and noise. At dawn they find him half buried in the ditch, alive but broken. The mare lies still beside him. He touches her neck once before the constables pull him to his feet. They tie his hands with coarse rope and lead him toward the nearest market town. His coat is torn, his hair plastered to his face. He looks less like a villain than a man who has run out of road. In Reading Jail, the cells are small and the air smells of lime wash. A turnkey locks the door and leaves him with bread, water, and silence. Outside, bells mark the hours. Inside, time measures itself by footsteps in the corridor. He feels neither shame nor anger, only the weight of stillness pressing in from every wall. The magistrate arrives 2 days later. The trial takes less than an hour. Witnesses speak, papers rustle, coins change hands. The word guilty falls without emphasis, like the closing of a book. Execution is scheduled for the following Thursday at Tyburn. They move him to Newgate for the final week. The prison hums with life. Hawkers selling gin through the bars, wives weeping, guards gambling in corners. Condemned men share cells, trading memories as though they were currency. He listens more than he speaks. Someone tells him that Claude Duval once danced with a lady on the highway before robbing her. Another swears that Dick Turpin escaped by swimming a river in the dark. Legends multiply here like mold in damp straw. At night, he dreams of the road. Not the robberies, but the motion, the rhythm of hooves, the smell of wet grass, the feeling of air rushing past his face. He wakes each morning to the opposite of motion: stone, iron, the slow drip of water from the ceiling. A chaplain visits. He speaks gently of repentance, of heaven, of forgiveness, bought not with coins but with faith. The highwayman listens, nods, and says he understands. He has learned over years of travel that people often need to hear agreement more than truth. Outside his window, the city prepares for spectacle. Tyburn days are holidays. Vendors set up stalls, selling pies and printed ballads. Children sit on their fathers' shoulders, waiting to see justice done. Some of the ballads already have his name in them, rhymed awkwardly with pain and chain. On the morning of his execution, he dresses carefully. The turnkey loans him a clean shirt in exchange for the last of his coins. A small crowd follows as he's led through Holborn. He keeps his eyes on the rooftops where laundry flutters like white flags. The sky is mercifully grey. Bright sunlight would make the scene feel crueler. At Tyburn, the cart stops beneath the great wooden beam. The noose swings gently in the breeze. He steps down, steady, almost graceful. The chaplain murmurs a prayer. The crowd murmurs stories that will outlive the truth. He looks once toward the road stretching west, the same road that had fed him and betrayed him. He imagines it empty, the wheel ruts filling slowly with rain. When the cap drops over his face, he thinks not of sin or salvation, but of the sound of hooves fading into distance. Afterward, the crowd disperses. Children collect the scraps of rope as souvenirs. Ballad sellers shout new verses before the ink is dry. By evening, London forgets and returns to its trades. In the taverns, men toast the idea of him, the gentleman thief, the courteous rogue. The real man lies buried near the crossroads, marked by nothing but the rumour of charm. Weeks later, travellers passing that way notice the mare's saddle still hanging from a branch in the hedge. No one takes it down. It sways slightly whenever coaches pass, as if acknowledging each new story that will borrow his name. The road endures. Carriages roll, guards reload, and somewhere another hungry man tightens a bridle under the same pale sky. London, 1721. The city wakes beneath a grey dawn, its streets already humming with carts, bells, and the smell of coal. Among the markets and tenements, a new scent drifts, sharp, sweet, unmistakable: gin. At first, it is a curiosity, a Dutch drink brought home by soldiers who served under William of Orange. They called it Geneva. Distillers shorten the word, strip away the juniper, and fill the barrels with whatever grain is cheapest. Soon gin is everywhere, sold by the glass, the cup, or the penny measure. A spirit for the poor, cheap enough to forget the cold. In the alleys of Holborn and Whitechapel, women sell it from buckets. Children drink it without question. A shop sign carved with a cat's face becomes famous. Customers slip a coin into its mouth and receive a shot poured from the paw. It is called Old Tom, and it becomes the city's emblem of comfort and ruin. For a penny, gin warms. For 2, it numbs. For 3, it kills softly. Records from the time tell the same story in different words. In 1721, there are fewer than 200 gin shops in London. By 1740, there are more than 7,000. Gin becomes the city's water. The poor drink it because the river is poison and beer costs too much. The rich drink it because they can, claiming it steadies the nerves. Artists begin to paint warnings. William Hogarth sketches the famous contrast: Beer Street, where craftsmen laugh in sunlight, and Gin Lane, where a mother drops her child from the stairs while she drinks. The print is an exaggeration, but not by much. Coroner's reports list infants drowned in tubs of spirit, labourers dead beside half-empty bottles. Gin is easier to make than bread. No license is needed, only grain, water, and fire. 1,000 backyard stills boil day and night. The air over the city thickens with a sweet chemical fog. Copper kettles bubble behind every second door, their owners half drunk from the fumes. Government sees profit first, morality second. Tax revenue rises with each gallon sold. In 1729, Parliament proudly reports millions of gallons distilled. No one asks how many lives are lost in the process. Gin is cheap and taxable, poverty is not. The taverns spill into the street. Men sleep in gutters beside their bottles. Women pawn furniture for a drink strong enough to erase the weak. An observer writes that gin renders the people fearless of death and fit for any villainy. Another calls it the opium of the poor, though the word itself has yet to reach England. Meanwhile, the city keeps building. Bridges, prisons, churches. Brick by brick, morality tries to keep pace with appetite. The new St. Paul's dome gleams above lanes where bodies lie in the morning frost. Reformers preach temperance, distillers preach freedom. Neither side listens for long. In 1736, Parliament passes the first Gin Act. Licenses required, fees imposed, fines promised. It lasts barely a month. Enforcement collapses under the weight of thirst. Gin flows again, stronger and cheaper, sold under names meant to sound innocent. Ladies' delight, knock me down, mother's ruin. The word craze begins to appear in pamphlets. Writers describe streets echoing with laughter that isn't joy, cries that aren't pain, faces that forget their own names. They warn that the city is dissolving, one glass at a time. Yet behind the panic, another truth persists. For thousands of Londoners, gin is the only relief from hunger, labour and cold. Bread costs a penny, gin costs the same, and it kills appetite. The choice between the two is not moral, it is mathematical. A parish clerk records the deaths of 6 infants in a single week, all noted simply as overlaid, a polite word for smothered by sleeping drunken parents. The entry ends with a small cross. No space is left for outrage. Outside the city, the countryside empties. Farmers sell grain to distillers instead of bakers. Prices rise, bread riots begin. The government blames the poor for drinking, and the poor blame the government for hunger. The wheel turns, powered by thirst. A new generation grows up never knowing sobriety. Children learn to walk beside mothers who lean on walls for balance. Street songs celebrate gin with the same affection once reserved for saints. One goes, "Gin, sweet gin, my comforter," when frost bites hard and days are poor. The tune is cheerful, the words are weary. By 1743, even Parliament tires of its own hypocrisy. A second Gin Act arrives, harsher, angrier. Licenses cost £50, a fortune to any small seller. Informers are promised rewards. Crowds riot in protest. Gin shops burn. Constables are pelted with bottles. The government retreats once more, but the idea of reform has taken root. Through it all, London keeps breathing. Market cries, church bells, the rattle of coaches on cobblestones. Gin is simply another rhythm, an undercurrent below the sound of progress. The smell of juniper lingers everywhere, in linen, in breath, in the river's slow current. And still, each evening, candles bloom in thousands of windows, and glasses clink in the dark. By 1745, even the distillers begin to slow. Corn is scarce, profits thinner, and the city's thirst no longer novelty, but habit. The word gin has become an accusation. Reformers hold public meetings lit by candles and outrage. They read aloud from Hogarth's prints, from sermons, from the latest death reports. One pamphlet describes a woman who sold her child's coat for gin and froze to death before morning. Another lists the number of abandoned infants found in doorways the week before. Numbers replace faces. Statistics take the place of empathy. Magistrates begin to enforce the old laws with new energy. Unlicensed sellers are fined, jailed, or forced to pour their barrels into the gutter. The smell of wasted alcohol fills the air outside police courts. Mobs sometimes attack the officers, shouting that gin is the only friend the poor have left. For a time, secrecy replaces open trade. Gin is sold from back rooms, disguised as medicine or vinegar. Bottles are hidden in baskets of fish, in loaves of bread, even in coffins carried to mock funerals. The city learns new ways to hide its vice, as it always does. And then, almost quietly, the tide begins to turn. The harvest of 1747 is good. Bread prices fall, wages rise a little, beer returns to favour. People discover that they can sleep without spirits and wake without shame. By 1751, Parliament tries again. This time, the Gin Act is written with care, enforced with patience, and supported by the Church and the Crown. It taxes distillers directly, controls retail licenses, and funds public education. The effect is slow but real. The rivers of gin begin to dry. London does not sober overnight, but by mid-century, the city's relationship with the bottle changes. Gin becomes respectable again, sold by name, measured by law. The first branded gins appear, distilled by craftsmen rather than opportunists. Juniper returns to the recipe. The same drink that once drowned a generation becomes a symbol of elegance. The reformers declare victory. The poor call it survival. The truth lies somewhere between the two. On warm evenings in small courtyards off Fleet Street, people still raise glasses and sing old songs. They remember the hard years, sometimes with bitterness, sometimes with fondness. Memory, like gin, distills reality into something stronger than truth. Outside the city, the countryside breathes easier. Fields once stripped for distilleries are green again. Farmers plant grain for bread instead of liquor. In the markets, loaves reappear beside apples and cheese. Children laugh with mouths clean of spirit. For the first time in decades, the scent of baking overtakes the smell of boiling mash. In taverns, the talk turns to new matters: colonies, industry, science. The age of reason begins to stir beneath the soot of the old century. Gin becomes a story, a caution, a ghost. London grows upward, outward, onward, always hungry, always forgetting. A writer walking the city in 1755 notes in his diary, "Men drink still, but not so madly. The spirit remains, but the frenzy is gone." He closes his notebook and moves on, perhaps to another tavern, perhaps to bed. Time turns the gin craze into memory. The prints fade, the sermons end, and the next generation treats it as legend. And yet when night falls and the lamps along the Thames flicker in the wind, the river still carries a faint sweetness, a ghost of juniper and fire. It drifts above the water, mingling with smoke and tide, reminding the city of the century when drink was cheaper than bread, and forgetting was a public pastime. London moves on. The carriages roll, the churches toll, and the bars fill once more. Only the flavour changes. History, like gin, is distilled from pain and memory, poured into new bottles, and sold again to those who think they will handle it better than the last.